All right. Welcome, everybody. Hello, my name is Amanda Holmes, CEO of Chat Homes International, and we are on to video 2, the 3-step formula for scooping up missed revenue, talking specifically about a simple formula that grew one business 3,546% in 12 months. Woo! And that's all thanks to part of the work that we've done with Deberah Bringelson. Hello, Deborah. Welcome. Thank you for coming back.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And for those of you that don't know Deborah, just a little bit of backstory. She is best known for her Steal of the Deal award, where she got a deal to come through with Virgin between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Richard Branson, and that deal should have never happened, and it is one for the history books. She's a 3-time most influential woman of the year honoree. She's worked with U.S. presidents, Congress, 3 governors, Fortune 500 CEOs, Fortune 100 CEOs, everything alike, and it's such a pleasure to have you here to assist in giving some education to the members of Chat Homes International.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and just a big, really quick, CHI, we've been in business for 25 years, best known for the ultimate sales machine, New York Times bestseller. We've assisted over 200,000 businesses, and we're about to give you some killer value right here in this next video. So, yes, CHI meets Deberah Bringelson's quantified business. Okay, beautiful. Quantum business, sorry. So what we're going to cover today is 3 specific steps because, well, let's give a little bit of back of what happened in the first video. Deborah, could you cover for them?
Sure. So what we talked about in the last video, and if you haven't had a chance to watch it, I highly suggest you stop this video, go back and watch the first one. But what we talked about is how most business owners are leaving 90% of their revenue completely untouched. I mean, think about that. What if you could even grow your revenue by 4 times? And last time we gave a really simple example of how to make that happen. But a lot of what we talked about was in theory. And today we're going to talk about how you, in a meaningful way, go from making your money at the top 3 to 10%, which, by the way, that's where all your competition is too. They're at the top 3 to 10%. We're going to talk about how you dig down deep into the buying pyramid, and we're even going to talk about this bottom 30% who says, I'm a hard no, I'm not buying from you no matter what you say to me, how you convert them not only into being interested in what you have to say, but actually into buying.
I can't wait. Beautiful. So in that 3-step formula, the first piece is really, how do you market? How do we utilize this educational approach, this core story methodology into your marketing, into getting more leads, getting more qualified leads?
Yeah. So I've used the core story concept, for more than 10 years now. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you know this, Amanda, but I used it in attracting Richard Branson. At the time, I didn't have Empire Research Group, who, by the way, is amazing and does a better job than I do. But we had a core story targeting just Richard Branson that took a deal. He had decided before he even started that he would not do business with my clients. He was in the definitely not interested category.
Really?
And we drove him up the buying pyramid to the point where he ultimately said, yeah, we're buying now. And that deal, by the way, over $300 million in yearly revenues for my clients. So it works. It's powerful. And so in the last video, we talked about a company we're using as an example. So for simplicity, let's just stick with that particular story so everybody can kind of follow along and see how they did it. So we talked about last time that this was a home seller. They were selling houses and they were making no money at all. until they rethought about who their ideal clients were. And by the way, did everyone do the homework? Remember? Had a little homework? I hope you got that done. So they discovered that their ideal buyers were at a higher risk for diabetes, heart disease, teen drug use. Their kids were at a risk for teen drug use, 300% greater risk, I think the number was. So we started our marketing on that. And a lot of people, when I talk to them about this, they say, so you marketed on diabetes and you sold houses. How do you actually make that happen? And that's the first thing that you want to do. You want to speak to your prospects about things that they care about, not what you care about. So a traditional home seller would say, let us show you our granite and all of our finishings and the lighting. They weren't interested in any of that. But they perhaps were in a family where, the man in the family was turning 54. And these are actual stories. Their father had died at 54 from heart disease. That was a stressor. They're laying in bed at night. They're not laying in bed at night thinking about granite and finishes. They're laying in bed at night thinking about, okay, what if I follow in my father's footsteps and die at 54? How do I leave my family and how do I care for them? That's what they cared about.
So we're assuming that everybody, you're listening to this and you've now understood, you've put yourself in your shoes of your buyer. This is what they're thinking about. This is what's keeping them up at night. So Deborah, how does that relate to how to market your business?
So one of the things that we did is we did advertising that was related to what our buyers cared about. Here's an example of something that we use. So imagine this. You've all seen those newspaper where you have all of the houses listed, and it's all pictures of beautiful houses or that kind of thing, and they all kind of blend together. What if you looked at that and you saw this? Or what if you weren't even looking for a house and you saw this in a newspaper as an ad? A couple of things here. One, faces draw people in. So we always tried to use faces. We want you to relate. And people, you see a face and you're like, well, who is that? Right? You see a picture of a house or a piece of equipment and you're like, yeah, okay, house, piece of equipment. But a face, who is that? Do I know that person? So it draws you in to look at it. And then this kind of thing startles people because they're not expecting it. So when they look at this, they're like, okay, that's something that I'm already worried about. I care about. Remember, our ideal buyers cared about this. Somebody who didn't care about this wasn't necessarily one of our ideal buyers. So we used things like this, and I'll show you one more, in our marketing. We put it in our brochures. So if you were walking, you were at maybe a festival outside and you walked by and you picked up a brochure, we have brochures on this. We put it in our newspaper advertising. Another thing that we did is we used the educational information that we got from the core story from Empire. We used that, and I used to be a press secretary in another life, and so I would write press releases that had all this great educational information in. And one of the things that I know is that if you write it really well, it's educational, it's not promotional, often what will happen is it will be taken word for word and just reprinted as an article. And so that was happening repeatedly. We would send out a press release on something that would have all of this really great stuff that at the end would lead to how you could solve your problems by buying a house. And I'm going to get to that in a minute because that sounds crazy. But it would be reprinted word for word in the newspaper. So the newspaper, that was free marketing for us because the newspaper was printing exactly what we wanted them to print.
Huge. And you know what I love that you teach, that you're saying this, because we believe here at CHI about methods that don't take wallet power, they just take horsepower, right? So I know for me, I learned that from watching our training and watching my father say that, and I got some ink articles in ink, and that's a couple million people seeing your article because you're providing something of value. And what you're teaching here, that you put it in newspapers, and I could see that very easily being a PPC. Can you imagine somebody searches for homes, you see homes for sale, homes cheap, and then how your kids are, what was it, like a dramatically more at a higher risk of being depressed and underachieving, and something about children just kind of pops out different from everyone else. I could see it at a trade show, the same thing. It's something completely different that sets you apart from all the rest of your competitors. I love it.
Right. And another thing that we did, so Tony Robbins always talks about living outside the box, even not having a box. And I love not having a box. So one of the things that I want people to do is I want them to start thinking about, how do we do this without any restrictions at all? And we did some crazy things, and they worked. One of the things that we did in our houses, we took this information that came out of the core story, we took this and framed it. So when you went into the bathroom to look at the bathroom, there sitting on the counter was art, informational art. That didn't cost us anything other than buying a couple of cheap frames to have in the houses. So we had that all throughout the houses. We hosted an event in one of our homes for someone else, and because it was their event, we couldn't market. So what we did is we made little movies that we had running on the TVs throughout the house that had information like this. There's no marketing here. There's no buy a house from us, but we had them just, looping over and over again. So as people walk by, it was subtle marketing. So you can do all of those kinds of things.
And I think what you're saying that's really key here is how we teach at CHI, which there's 7 musts of marketing. So if you have that same story and you apply it in every kind of different vertical, they stack upon each other, and it becomes way more powerful because people resonate with that story wherever they may see it. It makes marketing much easier because now that's the story I tell, and I just have to find which way to do it in whatever medium. And that's also why we're timeless, right? We've been able to teach this for the last 25 years, and it's still relevant on Twitter as it was with faxes 25 years ago.
Right.
That's great.
And, I think the other piece that's really important to remember about this kind of marketing, when you're constantly going at someone to sell them, let me tell you about my product, they're leaning back like, whoa, get away. But when you're telling them something that makes their life better, and it's a mindset shift for us as business owners to think about talking about them. It's kind of like you're dating, right? You go out on a date. Think about you go on a date and you're sitting there having coffee with someone, and they can only talk about themselves. Let me tell you about me.
Yikes.
But they're talking with someone and they're like, tell me about you. And when you do share a little difficulty, they're like, oh, well, have you considered doing this? They're helping you. You lean in, you feel cared about. And this kind of messaging makes your prospects feel cared about, and they're leaning in. Tell me more.
So step number 1 is how you're marketing. Make sure that you're paying attention to that other people that aren't just buying now, right? Those other divisions, whether it's press releases, whether it's your blog, your brochure, everything and anything, right?
Right. And be creative. I mean, one of the things that we did in this particular case was really crazy. We created little black books of resources for people. So, where to find great doctors in the neighborhood, where to find, the best restaurants, or where to find alternative medicines or that kind of thing. We created a little black book, like a man's little black book, and woven within that. So it was something that was really of value to people who lived in neighborhoods that we cared about. We created that, and then we wove in the educational information, and it was something that people actually, they were carrying around. It's like, okay, yeah, I need to find a new doctor. Where's a great restaurant to go, or I need something that's gluten-free or whatever. All that information in there. So what I'm saying is, be creative. Take this and really blow it up.
That's fantastic. I love that. Okay, so we talk about, how are you marketing? I think that second step to this is, how do you train your sales team? How do you make sure that that sales aspect actually turns those leads? You're getting so many more leads. How do you make them buyers?
Thanks for asking that, Amanda, because that's really key. And salespeople are conditioned to tell. And one of the first things you have to do is you have to teach people to listen. People will tell you how to sell them if you're listening. They'll tell you what they care about. So, one of the things that I do is I take all of this messaging from our marketing plan, and I have the salespeople learn all of the details. I want them to be able, you don't want to talk to somebody and just constantly be spouting facts and data. That's boring, right? But when you can weave it into the conversation, so when you discover, because you're listening, that someone, they say, you say to them something like, tell me about your family. Do your parents live in the area? And they say, my dad died at 54 and I just turned 54. And you say to them something about, wow, what was it? And they say heart disease. You talk about stress. You talk about, then they because they know the information, they say, did you know that living by the sea can reduce your stress immediately and relieve some of the causes of heart disease? Now, I haven't said one word to you yet about selling you a house. I'm engaging you in a conversation on a topic that you care about. I'm giving you information that potentially is valuable to you. And you have to train your salespeople to hold back. Sometimes in one-on-one selling situations, the sales team can actually be at the third or fourth conversation before they ever get to talking about the product. And that makes a lot of people crazy. They're like, no, I've got to sell. But what happens there is you're giving value. So when you get down to wanting to actually make the sale, you've got people who are trusting you because you've become an authority in their life. So it changes the whole dynamic of the sale.
I do have a stat to back that up too. So did you know? So studies show that with superstar salespeople, they do one thing, which is making sure that they establish that rapport. And if you establish true rapport, you're 40% of the way to the sale by just doing that one thing. Establishing rapport, the ultimate definition: they like you, they trust you, they respect you. So using something like this would gain that kind of trust and respect.
Right. So let's talk about how we do that in a practical way. I mean, we're still kind of at the theory stage. So in this particular case, one of the things that we did, when you're in the real estate industry, there are people who are selling your properties who don't work for you necessarily. And I wanted those salespeople to sell the way I wanted them to sell, the way we wanted them to sell. We wanted them to use this educational thing. So here's one of the things that we did, and it worked really beautifully. We had a couple of events. Some of them were live. Some of them were electronic. They were webinars, so the webinar didn't cost us anything. We invited them to come. We had a couple of gifts and stuff to get them to show up. We did a training for them, a brief training. We didn't go through 200 slides, maybe like 25, on the flow of the story, how to engage people, how to get them to be interested in asking for more information. So we did a little training. We made it really fun. And then what we did on the back of the website is they could go to a special login page, and all of our collateral was created for them. So they didn't have to be experts in how to deploy this. They just had to use what we created for them. So if they were going to meet with a prospect, this is the collateral that they would give them, the brochure or the little presentation that they would give them. And then there was email one to send out after that. There was an attachment. The collateral was already created. Email 2, the collateral was already created. Yes, we had to put some time in up front to make that happen, but it was very simple for them to use. They didn't have to think about it, and frankly, it was great for them. They loved it because they didn't have to work as hard to make sales. Because all the work was done for them. So that's the kind of thing that you can do to make it easy for salespeople. Because a lot of times, what I hear from people is salespeople are not going to want to do this. And you're right. They're not going to want to do this. So you have to convert them to and have them understand how this actually makes their lives easier, and they make more money because they're selling faster.
Yeah, and I'm starting to see a lot more of the, the automated sales message that comes into my inbox as a prospect, and it's very dry, Hey, you got a minute? Hey, are you the right person I should talk to? Can you imagine getting an email that talks about, did you know that your children are 400% more likely to be depressed in their lives, and there's 3 things that you could do to solve that. I'm making it up, but
right.
That is way more riveting and powerful. So to give your salespeople something that people can't wait to get another email from your sales rep, that's a good place to be.
Yeah. So how do you actually do that in your own business? And remember the exercise that you had from the last video. Think about what is keeping your ideal prospect awake at night. You looked at your 5 of your current ideal clients. What's keeping them awake at night? And then you start your messaging like you just said, Amanda. You don't send out an email that says, hey, do you need to have your website redesigned? No, I don't. Delete before I even open that email. But if you send out an email that says, these 3 things are likely to destroy your business, I'm going to give you one suggestion that will wipe those out immediately. Those kinds of things are the things that are going to get people's attention.
Fascinating. Okay. And I think we could talk all day on this, right? Because 92% of businesses don't have a sales process, and majority of sales teams, the sales training, all they have is, hey, did you sell one? When's the next one coming? So This is something that really sets businesses apart and sets them on fire, so that there's just no competition in their market at all.
Right.
But let's go to the third step here. So the third part of that formula is really deploying into the field. So can you I think you had a great story about a client that wasn't interested at all. Can you tell that?
Sure. Actually, it's a really great story. It's about some, people say to me, okay, so you might be able to get down and get another couple of percentage out of the buying pyramid, but there's no way you're going to get down into that bottom 30% to the people who say they're definitely not interested, those people who are a hard no. So here's an example of exactly how we did that. We, continuing with the story of this client so that we're all kind of seeing how the flow goes. We had an opportunity to host a party in one of our properties for our ideal clients, but we were just hosting it. We weren't in charge, and we were given very specific instructions. There will be no selling at this party. You're basically here because it's your property, but you can't do anything else. So what I did is I took the sales team and I trained them to, listen and ask, and they had one goal only, and that was to get contact information. And people are at a party, so a lot of them don't have business cards. So we had little pieces of paper where we could write down names and stuff, and they were supposed to go out, develop relationships. They were to talk about, find out what the person cared about, and then talk about things that they knew that was of interest to them that potentially solved their problems. So I was at this party because I wanted to kind of, play along and see how things were going. And I was doing exactly what the sales team was doing. And so I walked up to this man and his wife, and it was an older couple, probably in their late 70s. And she was wearing a hat. And I love hats. I have, I don't know, probably 40 hats, big hats. And I walked up to her and I, talk to her about her hat. And I said, I love hats. I wear hats, blah, blah, blah. And her husband starts talking about how fabulous women look in hats. And so we talk about that. And I discover that he's an investment banker, a very high-level investment banker. And he is there just for the party. And I just casually ask him, so what do you think about these homes? Oh, I've been watching this development for quite some time, and I just don't think it's going to go. They're not selling. And he was very, very, very negative. And one of the things that I knew from the research that Empire had done was that people were starting to buy nice homes like this as investment art. And an article had come out from Sotheby's about that. And I said, oh, really? You know, it's interesting. I just read an article in Sotheby's about how people were buying properties like this, like investment art. You know, instead of buying a Van Gogh, they were buying properties like this. What do you think of that? Oh, that's just ridiculous. That's terrible. That's, you know, I can't even imagine. Like, okay, so this guy is really not interested. Not only is he not interested, he's like really negative. So, you know, I continue talking with them, and it's pleasant, and then I excuse myself, and I'm walking around, and later I walk past him and one of the sales team that I had trained, and he didn't know that. He didn't know I trained this guy. He didn't know that we even were connected in any way. And I overhear him telling the sales guy, well, there was recently an article in Sotheby's that showed that people are buying properties like this, like in art. Okay. So I've taken my negative friend, and he's now taking my data and sharing it with other people. He's become my expert. And not only did this person become a buyer, he also referred other buyers. So that is how, and I never spoke to him once about buying a house. But that's how you take someone he was rooted in the bottom of the buying pyramid. Very negative. We drove him up, buying now and referring.
Wow. That's a great story. Yeah. So just something where you had that knowledge of more than just about your product or service. You knew about the industry. You knew what was interesting to those people. And another thing that's happened a lot more lately is being able to source that data too. We're seeing increases in the amount of people that want to know what the source was. So if it's a reputable source, and that ties back to the researcher that does all that research, you want to make sure that they know where that is, they know what sources to look at, that people will find that impressive.
Right. And I was able to say, look, I didn't make this up. It came from Sotheby's, which, you know, is exactly what you're talking about. It was a resource that made sense to him.
Beautiful. So we've covered step number 1 is how to market, right? And in every kind of different vertical, just as long as you have that story. How to train your sales team so that, you know, we're seeing the blurring of the lines of marketing and sales, right? Marketers are being asked to sell and salespeople are being asked to market. So having that training of that core story methodology, and then how you really deploy it in the field when you think you have no chance whatsoever.
Yeah. And in step 2, you know, I want people to remember, not only is it training the salespeople, but giving them those marketing tools, because you're right, it is blurring. So it's fascinating to me. You know, I work with smaller companies and I also work with larger companies that have marketing departments and sales teams. It's fascinating to me how they don't interact. But if you've got the marketing and messaging people who are creating the collateral and handing it over to the salespeople, that's how you make it really powerful. And that was the example that I gave you of, you know, training and creating the collateral using the website and all of the emails that were pre-written, the collateral pre-written, just ready to go.
So the third, like I said, I think that the third video is probably my favorite, right? It kind of ties back to this, you know, you think you don't have a chance at all to close this person, and then they became a raving fan and refer you a bunch of business, which in that business was a couple $1 million every time you close a deal. So can you give us a little bit of a sneak peek? What is that third video that people want to stay around for?
Well, so, you know, when you're growing a business, when you're growing your own life, things work and you want to pick the things that you know are going to work, but sometimes they don't, and what do you do then? And I think this is one of the areas where people really get stuck. They're like, they'll buy a new program or they'll buy a new training, and for some reason it doesn't work, or it doesn't work at the level that they want it to do. And so then they go and buy something else. They go in a different direction. And what I want people to understand is you have to make adjustments every step of the way. And how do you do that? And how do you do it when money's just not coming in? One of the things we're going to talk about is, remember I told you when we first started this conversation, this company made no money at all for 12 months, zero. And we're working together and they're still not making any money. We're putting things in place and the money's not coming in. What do you do then? How do you change things up and tweak it? And it's tweak it so that the money does start coming in. And that's what we did. And we're going to talk a lot about that. Those foundational, how do you fix it when it's not working?
Beautiful. Oh, Deborah, such a pleasure. Thank you so much. Is there anything that besides making a comment, if you have any questions, you can of course make comments, and we're going to be monitoring this and answering your questions, but is there anything that they can do to prepare for that next call?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in the last video, we asked you to do a little homework, and hopefully you've done that. If you haven't, go back to video 1, do that homework. Now what I want you to do is I want you to eliminate all of your boxes and start thinking about how you take that information that you have already created, combine it with what we've talked about in these last 2 videos, and start using it in creative ways. How do you change up your messaging? What would it look like if you changed it? If you have a sales team or if you're selling yourself, how do you incorporate that in? What questions do you need to be asking? So start thinking about all that, and then start thinking about what are your avenues to take this to your ideal buyers. Is it, trade shows, networking events like we've just talked about? Is it, social media? Where are your best avenues? And you don't have to come up with a full plan, but just start sketching it out. How would you make it work for you?
And Deborah, as you were saying this, I was just putting myself in the seat of the people that are watching. So for those of you that are hearing Deborah say this and you're already thinking, yeah, I could use some help with this. Like, how do I put together that plan? We do have something very exciting right after this series to give you an opportunity to be able to get what Nadia got, right, for you said a fraction of a percentage of the cost of what she paid, right?
Yeah. What we really want to do is we want people to take that high quality information at literally less than a fraction of 1% of what her cost was and use it yourself. And so we're going to be telling you how to do that, because this is all great in theory, but in order to scoop up those missing revenues, you've actually got to implement it. And we want to make sure that this is not just a theory for you. We want this to be your new reality.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Deborah.
Thank you.
Here we go to the next video.
Excellent.